Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Martinez, and today I'm sharing a story that completely changed my understanding of family, love, and what it means to finally find where you belong. My sister Amanda screamed that I had ruined her engagement party because I wore what she claimed was white to her celebration, but what she didn't know was that her fiancé Ryan had just pulled me aside and confessed he was deeply in love with me. 3 months later, when I walked down the aisle to marry the love of my life, Ryan showed up uninvited to my wedding reception and went completely pale when he discovered that my new father-in-law wasn't just successful in business, he was William Chen, the billionaire founder of one of the world's largest tech companies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Because understanding my family dynamics is crucial to everything that followed. Growing up as the younger Martinez sister in Phoenix, Arizona, I learned early that there were two distinct roles in our household. Amanda was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the daughter who made our mother Linda beam with pride at every school event and social gathering. Then there was me, Jessica, the afterthought, the one who somehow never quite measured up despite consistently bringing home better grades and staying out of trouble. Our father had passed away when I was 12 and Amanda was 15, leaving Mom to raise us alone. Instead of bringing us closer together, his death seemed to create an even wider chasm between Amanda and me. Mom threw herself into making sure Amanda had everything she needed to succeed socially, while I learned to be self-sufficient out of necessity rather than choice. Amanda got the designer clothes for school dances while I learned to shop at thrift stores and make my finds look expensive. She got the car for her 16th birthday while I got a job at the local coffee shop to save up for my own transportation. The pattern continued through high school and college. Amanda studied communications and spent most of her time at Arizona State University building her social network and dating guys from wealthy families. I studied accounting and worked part-time to pay for my expenses, even though we both received the same amount of financial support from Mom. Somehow, Amanda's money always seemed to disappear faster, and Mom would quietly slip her extra cash, while lecturing me about being more responsible with my finances. By the time we were both adults living in Phoenix, the dynamic had solidified into something that felt permanent. Amanda worked in event planning, a career that seemed tailor-made for someone who loved being the center of attention and had a natural talent for making everything look picture-perfect. I worked as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm, a job that was stable and well-paying but hardly glamorous enough to impress our mother's social circle. The differences between us became even more apparent when Amanda started dating Ryan Thompson. She met him at a charity gala where she was coordinating the silent auction, and he was there representing his commercial real estate firm as a sponsor. Ryan was everything our mother had always hoped Amanda would find: successful, handsome, well-educated, and from a good family with connections throughout Phoenix's business community. From the moment Amanda brought Ryan home for Sunday dinner, it was clear that Mom saw him as validation of everything she had invested in raising Amanda to be the perfect daughter. She would spend hours on the phone with her friends, talking about Amanda's wonderful boyfriend and how successful he was in commercial real estate. The wedding planning started before Ryan had even proposed, with Mom and Amanda poring over bridal magazines and discussing venue options as if the engagement was just a formality waiting to happen. I watched all of this from the sidelines, genuinely happy for Amanda, but also acutely aware that I was once again playing the supporting role in someone else's story. When Ryan was around for family dinners or holiday celebrations, I tried to fade into the background, not wanting to interfere with Amanda's spotlight moment. But I couldn't help noticing things about him that seemed inconsistent with the image Amanda was projecting. Ryan was quieter than the guys Amanda usually dated, more thoughtful in his responses when Mom would pepper him with questions about his business and his family. He would ask me about my work with genuine interest, remembering details from previous conversations in a way that surprised me. When Amanda would interrupt or change the subject, I would catch him looking slightly disappointed, as if he had actually wanted to hear my answer. There were small moments that stood out to me, though I tried not to read too much into them at the time. Like the evening when Amanda was running late to meet us for dinner, and Ryan and I ended up talking for over an hour about books we had both read, places we wanted to travel, and our thoughts about starting our own businesses someday. The conversation flowed so naturally that I almost forgot we were waiting for someone else. When Amanda finally arrived, full of apologies and dramatic stories about her day, the easy connection Ryan and I had been sharing seemed to evaporate. Or the time when Amanda was showing off her engagement ring to a group of her friends, and I noticed Ryan watching me instead of basking in the attention and congratulations. When our eyes met across the room, there was something in his expression that made my heart skip, but I quickly looked away and told myself I was imagining things. The engagement party was scheduled for a beautiful April evening at the Phoenix Country Club, a venue that Mom had been dreaming about for years. Amanda had been planning every detail for months, from the specific shade of blush pink for the linens to the exact variety of white roses for the centerpieces. She had even hired a photographer to capture every moment, planning to use the photos for their wedding website and social media announcements. I had been looking forward to the party, not because I particularly enjoyed these kinds of formal social events, but because I could see how much it meant to Amanda and Mom. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted Amanda to be happy, and seeing her excitement about the engagement had reminded me of the sister I had adored when we were children, before the dynamics of favoritism and competition had complicated everything between us. Choosing what to wear to the engagement party had been more challenging than I expected. I wanted to look nice enough to fit in with Amanda's crowd without drawing attention away from her special day. After trying on several options, I settled on a cream-colored dress that I had bought for a work event the previous year. It was elegant but understated, with a classic cut that I felt confident wearing. The color was definitely cream, not white, with enough warmth in the tone to distinguish it clearly from bridal white. The Phoenix Country Club looked absolutely stunning as guests began arriving for the party. The terrace overlooking the golf course had been transformed into an intimate garden party setting, with string lights creating a warm glow as the Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Amanda looked radiant in her blush pink gown, every inch the perfect bride-to-be, while Ryan stood beside her in a navy suit that complemented her dress beautifully. I arrived about 30 minutes after the party had started, having stayed late, at work to finish a project that couldn't wait until Monday. Mom rushed over to greet me, her eyes quickly scanning my outfit with the critical assessment that had become second nature to her whenever Amanda and I appeared together in public. The party was in full swing, with about 60 guests mingling on the terrace and spilling into the adjacent garden areas. I recognized most of the faces from Amanda's social circle and Mom's network of friends, along with several people from Ryan's business world that I had met at previous family gatherings. The atmosphere was festive and warm, with servers circulating champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet provided elegant background music. I made my way to the appetizer table, planning to grab a small plate and find a quiet corner, where I could observe and enjoy the celebration without getting in anyone's way. Amanda and Ryan were holding court near the center of the terrace, surrounded by friends and family members who wanted to congratulate them and hear the story of the proposal. Amanda was in her element, gesturing animatedly as she recounted every detail of how Ryan had surprised her with a romantic dinner at their favorite restaurant before getting down on one knee. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The evening felt perfect, exactly the kind of magical celebration that Amanda had always dreamed of having. I was genuinely happy watching her enjoy her moment, feeling proud of how beautiful and confident she looked as the center of attention. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it might feel like to be the bride-to-be at my own engagement party someday, surrounded by people who were excited to celebrate my happiness. That's when everything changed. I was reaching for a champagne flute from a passing server's tray when Amanda's voice cut through the pleasant buzz of conversation like a sword through silk. The tone was sharp enough that several nearby conversations paused, and I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach as I realized that tone was directed at me. "Are you seriously wearing white to my engagement party?" The question rang out across the terrace with enough volume and venom that it seemed to freeze the entire party in place. The string quartet continued playing, but every conversation stopped as heads turned to locate the source of the commotion. I felt the weight of 60 pairs of eyes settling on me as I stood there holding a champagne flute, wearing what I knew was definitely a cream-colored dress, not white. My first instinct was to look down at my outfit, wondering if somehow the lighting or the setting had changed the appearance of the dress I had carefully selected. But no, it was the same cream-colored fabric I had put on at home, with the same warm undertones that clearly distinguished it from white. I looked back up to find Amanda striding toward me across the terrace, her face flushed with anger, and her blush-pink gown flowing dramatically behind her. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. I could feel the curious stares of the other guests, some of whom were already pulling out their phones, whether to capture the drama or to nervously check their own devices. I couldn't tell. Mom appeared at Amanda's side almost instantly, her face showing the kind of panic that comes from watching a carefully orchestrated social event threatening to go off the rails. "Amanda, it's cream, not white," I said as calmly as I could manage, though my voice sounded smaller than I intended in the vast space of the country club terrace. I held up my hand in what I hoped was a peaceful gesture, not wanting to escalate the situation in front of all these people. "Don't lie to me, Jessica." Amanda's voice was getting higher and more shrill with each word. "You've always been jealous of me, and now you're trying to upstage me at my own engagement party. How could you be so selfish?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Jealous, selfish, upstaging. These were charges that had been leveled at me before in private family arguments, but never in front of such a large audience. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and hurt as I tried to process what was happening. Mom stepped closer to Amanda, her voice taking on the soothing tone she always used when trying to manage Amanda's emotions in public. "Girls, let's not make a scene. Jessica, sweetheart, maybe you could just pop home quickly and change into something different. We don't want any misunderstandings to spoil this beautiful evening." The suggestion felt like another slap. Here I was, being asked to leave my sister's engagement party to change clothes because of a misunderstanding about the color of my dress. The implication was clear. Regardless of who was right or wrong about the color, I was the one expected to accommodate, to smooth things over, to make sure Amanda's evening remained perfect. I looked around at the faces surrounding us, seeing expressions that ranged from uncomfortable embarrassment to poorly concealed excitement at witnessing family drama unfold. Some of Amanda's friends were whispering to each other behind their hands, and I caught sight of at least 2 people holding up their phones in a way that suggested they might be recording the confrontation. "Of course," I heard myself saying, though the words felt like they were coming from someone else. "I'll go change." The lie came easily because it was what everyone expected to hear, the path of least resistance that would allow the party to continue and Amanda's special evening to be salvaged. But even as I said it, I knew I had no intention of going home to change clothes. I was wearing a cream-colored dress to my sister's engagement party, not white, and I had done nothing wrong. I set my untouched champagne flute on a nearby table and reached for my purse, preparing to make the walk of shame across the terrace to the parking lot. The crowd parted slightly to let me through, and I could feel every eye following my progress as whispered conversations began to resume behind me. "I'm sorry," I heard Amanda call out, her voice now tinged with what sounded like genuine regret. "I didn't mean to make such a big deal about it. You know how stressed I get about these things." I turned back to give her a small wave, not trusting my voice to remain steady if I tried to respond. She looked beautiful standing there in her blush pink gown, surrounded by all the people who had come to celebrate her happiness. And I felt a familiar pang of love mixed with sadness that our relationship had become so complicated. The walk to the parking lot felt endless, my heels clicking against the stone pathway while the sounds of the party continued behind me. By the time I reached my car, parked among the BMWs and Mercedes and other luxury vehicles that belonged to Amanda's social circle, I felt like I might collapse from the emotional weight of what had just happened. I sat in my modest Honda Civic for several minutes, trying to collect myself before attempting to drive home. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for the valets and a few other staff members, and the relative quiet felt like a blessing after the public humiliation I had just endured. I was fishing in my purse for my keys when my phone buzzed with an incoming text message. The message was from Ryan. "Don't leave yet. Can you meet me by the fountain in the garden? Please. I need to talk to you." I stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Ryan had never texted me before. In all the time he had been dating Amanda, our communication had been limited to polite conversation at family gatherings, and the occasional group text about dinner plans or holiday arrangements. The idea that he wanted to talk to me privately, especially after what had just happened at the party, seemed surreal. My first instinct was to ignore the message and drive home. I had already caused enough drama for one evening, and the last thing Amanda needed was to discover that her fiancé was seeking out private conversations with her sister. But something about the word "please" in his message made me hesitate. There was an urgency there that suggested this wasn't about making polite conversation or offering sympathy about the dress incident. I looked back toward the country club, where I could see the warm glow of the party lights and hear the faint sound of music and laughter drifting across the grounds. Amanda's engagement party was continuing without me, probably better without me, and she was undoubtedly having a wonderful time being congratulated and celebrated by everyone who mattered to her. The fountain Ryan had mentioned was tucked away in a quiet corner of the country club's gardens, far enough from the main terrace that it offered privacy while still being within the bounds of the club property. I had noticed it earlier when I was looking for a restroom, a small stone fountain surrounded by desert landscaping and lit by subtle pathway lighting. Against my better judgment, I got out of my car and walked back toward the club, taking a roundabout path through the gardens that would allow me to reach the fountain without passing through the main party area. The Arizona evening air was cooling, down from the heat of the day, and I could smell the desert flowers that were planted throughout the landscaped areas. Ryan was already waiting by the fountain when I arrived, pacing back and forth in front of the stone structure like he was trying to walk off nervous energy. He had loosened his tie and run his hands through his hair, disturbing the perfectly styled look he had maintained during the party. When he saw me approaching, he stopped pacing and turned to face me with an expression I had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice quiet but intense in the small space of the garden alcove. "I wasn't sure you would get my message, or if you'd want to talk to me after what just happened in there." "Ryan, what's this about?" I asked, though something in his demeanor was making my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the walk through the gardens. "If this is about the dress thing, I really don't want to discuss it. I think I've had enough family drama for one evening." He shook his head quickly. "It's not about the dress. Well, not exactly. It's about something I should have said a long time ago, and I'm running out of chances to say it." The words hung in the desert air between us, and I felt something shift in the atmosphere of our conversation. This wasn't going to be a polite chat about the party or an apology for Amanda's behavior. Whatever Ryan wanted to tell me, it was something significant enough that he had risked leaving his own engagement party to seek me out in private. "I'm in love with you, Jessica." The confession hit me like a physical force, stopping my breath and making me take an involuntary step backward. I stared at Ryan's face in the soft lighting from the pathway lamps, looking for some sign that I had misheard or misunderstood what he had just said. But his expression was completely serious. his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made it impossible to doubt his sincerity. "Ryan, no," I whispered, though the words came out sounding more like a question than a statement. "You can't say that. You're engaged to Amanda. You're at your engagement party right now." "I know exactly where I am and what I'm supposed to be celebrating tonight," he said, his voice gaining strength as he continued speaking. "But I can't keep pretending that my heart is in this when every day I find myself thinking about you instead of her." The silence that followed Ryan's confession stretched between us like a chasm I wasn't sure either of us knew how to cross. I could hear the distant sounds of the engagement party continuing without us, the gentle murmur of conversation and occasional burst of laughter that reminded me exactly where we were and what Ryan was supposed to be celebrating tonight. Fountain behind him created a soft, trickling sound that seemed amplified in the quiet space we had created around ourselves. "You don't understand what you're saying," I finally managed to whisper, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Ryan, you're about to marry my sister. You proposed to her. You're wearing the engagement ring she picked out for you right now." He looked down at his left hand as if he had forgotten about the gold band Amanda had insisted on getting him. A matching set to go with her elaborate diamond engagement ring. "I know what I'm wearing, and I know what I did. But Jessica, I need you to understand that I've been living in a fog for months, trying to convince myself that what I feel for Amanda is enough to build a marriage on. It has to be enough," I said, taking another step back from him. "Ryan, there are 60 people in there celebrating your engagement. Your families, your friends, people who have already bought plane tickets for your wedding. You can't just decide you're in love with someone else." "I didn't decide anything," he said, his voice gaining an edge of desperation. "Do you think I wanted this to happen? Do you think I planned to fall in love with my fiancé's sister? I've been fighting these feelings for months, telling myself they would go away once Amanda and I got more serious." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling cold despite the warm Arizona evening. "When did this start? These feelings you think you have?" "I don't think I have them, Jessica. I know I do. And it started the very first time I met you, at your mother's birthday dinner 2 years ago. Do you remember that night?" I did remember, though I had tried not to think about it too often in the months that followed. It had been one of Mom's elaborate dinner parties, the kind she loved to host where she could show off her cooking skills and create the perfect setting for Amanda to shine. Amanda had been running late that evening, stuck at work, dealing with some crisis related to a wedding she was coordinating, leaving Ryan and me to make conversation while we waited for her to arrive. "Amanda was 2 hours late," I said quietly, the memory coming back with startling clarity. "You kept checking your phone and Mom kept apologizing and insisting we start dinner without her." "I stopped checking my phone after the first hour," Ryan said, "because I realized I didn't want Amanda to show up and interrupt our conversation. We talked about everything that night. Your job, your dreams of maybe starting your own accounting firm someday, the book you were reading, places. You wanted to travel. Real conversation, the kind I hadn't had in months." I remembered that dinner with uncomfortable vividness now that Ryan was forcing me to revisit it. We had talked for over 2 hours, covering topics that ranged from serious to silly, finding common ground in unexpected places. I had learned that Ryan loved to read history books in his spare time, that he was secretly worried about whether he was cut out for the pressure of running his own business someday, that he had always wanted to visit Scotland because of his grandmother's stories about growing up there. That was just normal conversation, I protested weakly. People talk at dinner parties. It doesn't mean anything. It meant something to me, Ryan said firmly. When Amanda finally showed up that night, she barely apologized for being late. She spent the rest of the evening talking about work drama and wedding planning for her clients, never once asking what you and I had been discussing or showing any interest in the fact that we had gotten to know each other better. I closed my eyes, remembering how the dynamic had shifted the moment Amanda arrived. She had swept into the dining room like a whirlwind, full of apologies and dramatic stories about bridezilla clients and demanding vendors. The intimate conversation Ryan and I had been sharing evaporated instantly as Amanda took over the evening with her natural charisma and storytelling ability. Amanda was stressed about work, I said, though the defense sounded hollow even to me. She wasn't trying to be rude or dismissive. She never is trying to be, Ryan replied. That's what makes it so hard to explain to people. Amanda isn't cruel or malicious. She's just so focused on herself and her own experiences that she doesn't really see other people clearly, including me. The truth of that observation hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I had watched Amanda navigate relationships for years, always managing to make everything about her own needs and emotions without seeming to realize she was doing it. Her boyfriends often started out charmed by her energy and confidence, but many of them eventually grew frustrated by her inability to focus on anyone else's perspective for very long. That doesn't give you the right to decide you're in love with me, I said, though my voice lacked the conviction I was trying to project. Ryan, even if Amanda isn't perfect, she loves you. She's planning a life with you. She talks about you constantly when you're not around. She talks about the wedding constantly, he corrected. She talks about the house we're going to buy, and the honeymoon we're going to take, and the parties we're going to host. But Jessica, she never talks about me, about who I am, or what I think, or what I dream about. When was the last time Amanda asked you about something you cared about that wasn't related to her in some way? The question stopped me cold, because I couldn't immediately think of an answer. Amanda did talk about me sometimes, but usually in the context of how my choices or decisions affected her. When I had gotten my promotion at work, her first response had been excitement about how I could afford to give better wedding gifts now. When I had mentioned thinking about dating again after a long dry spell, she had immediately started planning to set me up with one of Ryan's friends so we could double date. She cares about me, I said weakly. I'm sure she does in her way, but caring about someone and really seeing them are two different things. Amanda has never asked me what I actually want our life to look like beyond the surface details. She's never wondered if I'm happy in my career or if I have doubts about the future we're planning. She just assumes that because I proposed, I must be perfectly content with the life she's designed for us. I leaned against the edge of the fountain, needing the support as the weight of this conversation settled over me. So why did you propose if you weren't happy? Ryan ran his hands through his hair again, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as a sign of his frustration and internal conflict. Because everyone expected me to. Because Amanda had been dropping hints for months, and your mother kept asking when I was going to make it official, and my own parents kept talking about how wonderful Amanda was, and how lucky I was to have found someone so perfect for me. Those aren't reasons to propose to someone. No, they're not. But at the time, I convinced myself they were enough. I thought maybe love would grow over time, that the feelings I had for you were just a fantasy I needed to get over. I thought marriage would make everything clearer, that committing to Amanda would help me focus on building a real relationship with her. And instead, I find myself comparing everything Amanda does to what I think you would do in the same situation. When she's planning our wedding, I imagine what kind of wedding you would want. When she talks about the future, I wonder what dreams you have that you don't share with anyone. When we're at family dinners and you're sitting there quietly while everyone else talks, I wish I could ask you what you're thinking about. The honesty in his voice was devastating because I could hear the pain behind it. This wasn't some casual attraction or fleeting infatuation. Ryan was describing the kind of deep longing that came from really seeing someone and feeling unseen in return. Ryan, this is dangerous territory, I said softly. Even if everything you're saying is true, even if you do have feelings for me, we can't act on this. Amanda is my sister. Whatever problems you have in your relationship with her, this isn't the solution. I know it's not a solution, he said desperately. I'm not asking you to run away with me or to help me break up my engagement. I just needed you to know the truth before it was too late to tell you. Too late for what? Too late for you to know that someone sees you, Jessica. Really sees you. Too late for you to understand that the way your family treats you isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inability to recognize what's right in front of them. Tears started burning behind my eyes at his words because they touched on something I had been struggling with my entire life. The constant feeling of being overlooked, undervalued, dismissed in favor of Amanda's louder and more dramatic personality. I had learned to tell myself that it didn't matter, that I didn't need external validation to know my own worth. But Ryan's recognition of the pattern made me realize how much it had actually affected me. You don't know me well enough to make those kinds of judgments, I whispered. Don't I? In the 2 years I've been dating Amanda, I've probably had more real conversations with you than I've had with her. Every time we're all together, I find myself watching you, learning things about you from the way you respond to situations or the questions you ask or the way you listen when other people are talking. He stepped closer to me, close enough that I could see the sincerity in his eyes in the soft garden lighting. I know that you tip generously even when the service is mediocre because you understand what it's like to work hard for your money. I know that you remember details about people's lives that they mentioned months ago in passing conversation. I know that you read voraciously and think deeply about things, but you rarely share your opinions because you're used to being interrupted or dismissed. Each observation felt like a small revelation because they were things about myself that I thought no one noticed. I had never realized that Ryan was paying such close attention to the small details of my personality and behavior. I know that you wanted to study art in college but chose accounting instead because it was more practical, and you were worried about being able to support yourself, he continued. I know that you still sketch sometimes in your spare time, but you don't show your drawings to anyone because Amanda made fun of them once when you were teenagers. How do you know about the sketching? I asked, shocked that he was aware of something I had never mentioned to anyone in our family. Because I saw your sketchbook in your purse once when you were looking for your keys at Sunday dinner. You tried to hide it, but I caught a glimpse of a drawing you had done of the desert landscape outside your mother's window. It was beautiful, Jessica. Really beautiful. I felt exposed and seen in a way that was both terrifying and wonderful. No one in my family had ever paid attention to my artistic interests or recognized that I still pursued creative outlets in private. The fact that Ryan had not only noticed but remembered and appreciated what he had seen felt like a gift I wasn't sure I deserved. This doesn't change anything, I said, though my voice sounded less certain than before. Even if you do see me in ways that other people don't, even if we do have some kind of connection, you're still engaged to my sister. You're still planning to marry her in 3 months. Am I? He asked quietly. Jessica, I came out here tonight to tell you how I feel because I don't think I can go through with this wedding, not when I know there's something real and genuine possible with someone else. Someone else being me. Someone else being you. The weight of what he was suggesting settled over me like a blanket I wasn't sure I wanted to wrap around myself. Ryan was talking about calling off his engagement to Amanda, devastating my sister and throwing both of our families into chaos, all because of feelings he thought he had for me. What if you're wrong? I asked. What if these feelings you think you have are just cold feet about getting married? Or anxiety about committing to Amanda? Or some kind of fantasy about the road not taken? What if you blow up your entire life and mine for something that isn't even real? What if I'm right? He countered. What if these feelings are real and I marry Amanda anyway, and we both spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been? What if I trap Amanda in a marriage with someone who's never going to love her the way she deserves to be loved, because my heart belongs to someone else. I had never thought about the situation from Amanda's perspective in quite those terms. She deserved to be with someone who was completely devoted to her, someone who wasn't constantly comparing her to another woman or wishing she was someone different. If Ryan really was in love with me, then marrying Amanda would be unfair to her, regardless of how it affected me. She would be devastated, I said quietly. Amanda has been planning this wedding since she was a little girl. She's already sent save-the-date cards to everyone she knows. She's put deposits down on vendors and booked the honeymoon and started shopping for a wedding dress. I know, and I hate that I'm the one who would have to hurt her that way. But, Jessica, wouldn't it be worse to marry her knowing that I'm not the right person for her? Wouldn't it be worse to let her build a life with someone who's going to spend their marriage wishing they were with someone else? The logic was sound, even though the emotional reality of what he was suggesting felt overwhelming. Amanda would be crushed if Ryan called off their engagement, but she would eventually recover and find someone who could love her wholeheartedly. The alternative was a marriage built on a foundation of Ryan's unexpressed longing for another woman, which seemed destined for failure and heartbreak. What about me? I asked. What if Amanda never forgives me for this? What if my mother decides I'm the villain who destroyed Amanda's happiness? What if I lose my family over this? What kind of family would you be losing? Ryan asked gently. Jessica, you've spent your entire life trying to earn love and approval from people who take you for granted. You've made yourself smaller and quieter and less demanding so that Amanda could shine brighter. And what has it gotten you? You're still the afterthought, still the one who gets blamed when things go wrong. His words stung because they contained more truth than I wanted to acknowledge. I had spent years trying to be the perfect daughter and sister, hoping that if I just caused less trouble and asked for less attention, I would eventually earn the same kind of unconditional love and support that Amanda seemed to receive effortlessly. Maybe that's just how families work, I said weakly. Maybe someone always has to be the supporting character in someone else's story. Or maybe you've just never been in a family that knows how to see your value, Ryan said. Jessica, you're not a supporting character. You're smart and talented and thoughtful and beautiful, and you deserve to be with people who recognize those qualities without you having to prove them over and over again. The tears I had been fighting finally spilled over because his words touched something deep inside me that I had been protecting for years. The part of me that wondered if I was inherently less lovable than Amanda, less worthy of attention and care and consideration. Hearing someone articulate my value so clearly felt like a revelation. I don't know what to do with this, I whispered, through my tears. Ryan, I don't know how to handle what you're telling me. You don't have to handle anything right now, he said gently. I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight or to promise me anything. I just needed you to know the truth before I figure out how to move forward. Are you really going to call off the engagement? I think I have to. I don't see how I can marry Amanda when I feel this way about you. It wouldn't be fair to any of us. I looked back toward the country club, where the sounds of the engagement party were still drifting across the gardens. Amanda was in there celebrating what she thought was the beginning of her happily ever after, surrounded by everyone who loved her and wanted to see her happy. In a few hours, Ryan would have to go back inside and pretend to be the devoted fiancé, knowing that he was planning to shatter her dreams. She's going to hate me, I said quietly. She might, for a while. But Jessica, Amanda's anger isn't your responsibility to manage. You didn't do anything wrong by existing or by being someone that another person could fall in love with. Amanda's happiness isn't dependent on you making yourself invisible. It feels like it is sometimes. I know it does, but that's not your fault, and it's not your burden to carry. We stood there in the garden for several more minutes, both of us lost in our own thoughts about what this conversation meant and what would happen next. The fountain continued its gentle trickling, and the party sounds gradually began to wind down as guests started making their way to the parking lot. "I should go," I finally said. "People will start looking for you soon, and Amanda will want to say goodbye to everyone." "Will you think about what I said?" Ryan asked. "Not about us, necessarily, but about what you deserve in your life? About the possibility that there are people out there who would see your worth without you having to prove it to them?" "I'll think about it," I promised, though I wasn't sure I was ready for the kind of self-examination his words were demanding. "And Jessica? Whatever happens with the engagement, whatever Amanda says or your mother says or anyone else says, please remember that this conversation happened because I needed you to know that you matter. You're not invisible, and you're not forgettable, and you deserve so much more than the scraps of attention your family gives you." I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady if I tried to respond. Ryan reached out as if he wanted to touch my hand or hug me goodbye, but then seemed to think better of it and stepped back instead. "I'll see you soon," he said quietly. "Take care of yourself, Ryan." I walked back to my car through the now mostly empty parking lot, my mind reeling from everything that had just happened. In the space of one evening, I had been publicly humiliated by my sister over a dress that wasn't even white, received a love confession from her fiancé, and been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about my place in my own family. As I drove home through the quiet Phoenix streets, I found myself thinking about the memory Ryan had referenced. That first dinner where we had talked for hours while waiting for Amanda to arrive. I had enjoyed that conversation more than I had admitted to myself at the time, but I had dismissed it as a pleasant evening that didn't mean anything significant. Now I wondered if I had been deliberately blind to the connection Ryan and I had shared that night and in the months that followed. Had I been so conditioned to see myself as Amanda's less interesting sister that I couldn't recognize when someone was genuinely drawn to my personality and thoughts? Had I been so focused on staying in my assigned role as the supporting character that I had missed signs that someone wanted to know me as the main character in my own story? The possibility was both thrilling and terrifying because it suggested that everything I thought I knew about my worth and my place in the world might be incomplete. If Ryan could see qualities in me that even I didn't fully recognize, what else might I be capable of that I had never allowed myself to explore? By the time I reached my apartment, I was emotionally drained, but also strangely energized by the evening's revelations. I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at my phone and wondering if Ryan was back at the party, pretending to celebrate his engagement while knowing he was planning to end it. I wondered what Amanda was thinking, whether she had noticed that both Ryan and I had disappeared from the party around the same time, whether she suspected that something had shifted in the carefully maintained balance of our family dynamics. Most of all, I wondered what I was going to do with the knowledge that someone saw me as more than just Amanda's quieter, less remarkable sister. For the first time in my life, I had been offered a glimpse of what it might feel like to be truly seen and valued by another person, and I wasn't sure I was brave enough to reach for that kind of visibility and all the complications it would bring. 3 days passed in a strange haze of normalcy that felt anything but normal. I went to work, attended meetings, reviewed financial reports, and responded to emails as if my entire world hadn't been turned upside down by a conversation in a country club garden. My colleagues at the accounting firm noticed nothing different about my demeanor, which surprised me because I felt like the emotional upheaval of that evening should have been written across my face in permanent ink. But life continued its relentless forward momentum despite the chaos in my personal world. Amanda called me twice during those 3 days, both times with her voice artificially bright and cheerful, as if the engagement party confrontation had never happened. The first call was ostensibly to thank me for coming to the party and to apologize again for making such a big deal about my dress. The second call came with an invitation to lunch, which felt like an olive branch I wasn't sure I was ready to accept. I found myself analyzing every interaction with my family through the lens of Ryan's observations about how they treated me. When Mom left me a voicemail asking if I could help her organize some paperwork for her taxes, my first instinct was to immediately agree, as I always did. But then I paused and wondered if she had asked Amanda to help first, or if I was simply the default choice for tedious tasks that required attention to detail and didn't come with social rewards. When Amanda's third call came on Thursday evening, her tone was different enough that I knew something had shifted in whatever internal calculations she had been making about the engagement party incident. "Jess, we need to talk," she said without her usual preamble of small talk and pleasantries. "Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow afternoon? There's something I need to ask you about." The request felt loaded with unspoken implications, and I found myself wondering what Amanda suspected or what she might have observed that evening. Had she noticed Ryan's absence from the party at the same time I had disappeared? Had someone mentioned seeing us together in the gardens? Or was this simply Amanda's way of trying to repair our relationship after the public confrontation over my dress? "Of course," I heard myself saying, though every instinct was telling me to be cautious. "Where do you want to meet?" "That little cafe in Scottsdale, the one with the good pastries. You know the place." I did know the place. It was a small, intimate coffee shop that Amanda and I had discovered during a rare sister bonding day several years earlier. The choice of location felt deliberate, as if she was trying to invoke memories of a time when our relationship had been simpler and less fraught with the complications of adult family dynamics. The next afternoon, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early and chose a table near the window where I could watch for Amanda's arrival. The space was cozy and quiet, with only a handful of other customers scattered throughout the small dining area. I ordered a latte and tried to prepare myself mentally for whatever conversation Amanda had planned. She arrived exactly on time, looking polished and put together in a way that seemed effortless, but I knew required significant time and effort. Amanda had always possessed the kind of natural beauty that photographs well and draws attention in social situations. But she also understood how to enhance and present that beauty in ways that maximized its impact. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her outfit struck the ideal balance between casual and elegant. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she settled into the chair across from me, her tone warmer than it had been on the phone, but still carrying an undertone I couldn't quite identify. "I know things have been a little weird between us since the party, and I wanted to clear the air." "Amanda, you really don't need to apologize again about the dress thing," I said, though I suspected this conversation was going to venture into territory that had nothing to do with what I had worn to her engagement party. "Actually, that's not exactly why I wanted to talk to you." She paused to order a cappuccino from the server, using the interruption to gather her thoughts, or perhaps to study my expression for clues about what I might be thinking. "Then what's this about?" Amanda leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone, even though we were sitting far enough from other customers that our conversation couldn't be overheard. "It's about Ryan. Something's been off with him since the engagement party, and I can't figure out what's going on." My heart started beating faster, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Off how?" "He's been distant, distracted. When I try to talk to him about wedding planning or our future together, he gives me these vague responses like his mind is somewhere else entirely. And Jessica, he keeps asking about you." The words hit me like a physical blow, confirming my worst fears about where this conversation was heading. Asking about me how? Casual questions, but too many of them to be normal. How you're doing at work, whether you're dating anyone, what you thought about the engagement party before the whole dress situation happened. It's like he's fishing for information about you, and I can't understand why. I took a sip of my latte to buy myself time to think, my mind racing through possible responses that wouldn't reveal the truth of what had happened in the country club garden. Maybe he just feels bad about how the evening ended. He might be worried that I was upset or that there's tension in the family because of what happened. That's what I thought at first, Amanda said, her eyes never leaving my face. But Jessica, it's more than that. He remembers things about you that I don't even remember. Details about conversations you've had, things you've mentioned in passing at family dinners. It's like he's been paying attention to you in a way that... She trailed off, as if she wasn't sure how to finish the sentence. In a way that what? In a way that makes me wonder if there's something I should be concerned about. The accusation hung in the air between us, not quite spoken but clearly implied. Amanda was asking me if there was something inappropriate happening between her fiancé and her sister, and I found myself in the impossible position of knowing that her suspicions were entirely justified while being unable to admit the truth, without destroying multiple relationships simultaneously. Amanda, I think you're reading too much into normal social interactions, I said carefully. Ryan is a thoughtful person who pays attention to the people around him. That's one of the things that makes him a good partner for you. Is it? She asked. And for the first time in our conversation, I heard genuine vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. Because lately, I'm starting to wonder if Ryan is as committed to our relationship as I thought he was. The admission surprised me because Amanda had always projected complete confidence in her romantic relationships. She had never expressed doubts about Ryan's devotion or questioned whether their engagement was as solid as it appeared to outside observers. What makes you say that? Little things that are starting to add up to something bigger. He's been less enthusiastic about wedding planning, more reluctant to make decisions about our future together. When I talk about the house we're going to buy or the honeymoon we're going to take, he just nods along without contributing much to the conversation. I found myself in the strange position of feeling sympathy for both Amanda and Ryan simultaneously. She was describing the behavior of someone who was having serious doubts about getting married, which aligned perfectly with what Ryan had told me about his feelings and his intentions. But Amanda was interpreting his distance as a problem to be solved rather than a sign that their relationship might not be as solid as she had believed. Have you tried talking to him directly about your concerns? I asked. I've tried, but he just brushes off my questions and tells me he's fine, just stressed about work. But Jessica, I know what work stress looks like, and this isn't it. This feels like something deeper. Amanda reached across the table and touched my hand, a gesture that was both affectionate and slightly desperate. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. My stomach clenched with anxiety about what question was coming next. Okay. Has Ryan ever said anything to you about our relationship? Anything that made you think he might be having second thoughts about getting married? The question was so direct and so loaded with potential consequences that I felt momentarily paralyzed. Amanda was giving me an opportunity to tell her the truth about Ryan's confession, to warn her that her fiancé was planning to call off their engagement because he believed himself to be in love with her sister. But telling her the truth would also mean admitting that I had kept this information secret for several days, and that I had been the recipient of romantic declarations from her fiancé. Amanda, if Ryan is having doubts about your relationship, that's something he needs to discuss with you directly, I said, choosing my words as carefully as possible. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to speculate about his feelings or motivations. That's not what I'm asking, she said, her grip on my hand tightening slightly. I'm asking if he's said anything specific to you, because Jessica, I saw him leave the engagement party around the same time you did, and he was gone for almost an hour before he came back inside. My breath caught in my throat as I realized that Amanda had been more observant that evening than I had given her credit for. She hadn't just noticed that both Ryan and I had been absent from the party. She had been tracking the timing and duration of our disappearances. I went home to change clothes, remember? You were upset about my dress. But you didn't change clothes, Amanda pointed out with the kind of attention to detail that made her good at her event planning job. When I saw you leave, you were wearing that cream-colored dress. And when the party was over and people were saying goodbye, you weren't there at all. I had been caught in an inconsistency I hadn't even realized I had created. In my emotional state after the conversation with Ryan, I had completely forgotten that I had told everyone I was going home to change, when in reality I had simply left the party and driven home without returning. I decided not to come back, I admitted. After, what happened with the dress? I didn't feel comfortable returning to the party. I thought it would be better to just go home and let everyone enjoy the rest of the evening without any more drama. So where did you go for that hour before you went home? The question was asked with the precision of someone who already suspected they knew the answer but wanted confirmation. Amanda had clearly given this considerable thought since the engagement party, piecing together timelines and trying to understand what had happened during the gap between my dramatic exit and my failure to return. I sat in my car for a while, trying to calm down, I said, which was partially true even though it omitted the most significant part of what had actually happened. Then, I drove home. Amanda studied my face for a long moment, and I could see her processing my response and weighing it against whatever other information she had gathered. Jessica, I need you to promise me something. What? If Ryan ever says anything to you about our relationship, anything that suggests he's having doubts or second thoughts about getting married, I need you to tell me immediately. I can't fix problems I don't know exist, and I can't fight for my relationship if I don't understand what I'm fighting against. The request put me in an impossible position because Ryan had already said everything Amanda was worried about him saying, and much more besides. He had explicitly told me that he was planning to call off their engagement because he believed himself to be in love with me instead of her. But Amanda was asking me to promise to betray his confidence if he ever shared such thoughts with me, not knowing that he already had. Amanda, I hope it doesn't come to that, I said carefully. I hope you and Ryan can work through whatever issues you're having in your relationship. But you'll tell me if he says anything? I found myself nodding agreement to a promise I knew I couldn't keep, adding another layer of deception to an already complicated situation. Amanda seemed satisfied with my response, but I could see that her concerns about Ryan's behavior hadn't been alleviated by our conversation. There's something else I need to tell you, she said, her tone shifting to something more serious. I've been thinking about the family dynamics lately, especially after what happened at the engagement party, and I want you to know that I'm aware I haven't always been the best sister to you. The unexpected admission caught me completely off guard. Amanda had never before acknowledged any problems with how she treated me or how our family functioned around her needs and preferences. Amanda, you don't need to— Yes, I do, she interrupted. Jessica, I know that sometimes I dominate conversations and take up all the attention in family situations. I know that Mom has always been more focused on my achievements and my relationships than on yours. And I know that can't have been easy for you growing up. I stared at her across the small cafe table, wondering what had prompted this moment of self-reflection and whether it was genuine or strategic. Amanda had never shown much awareness of family dynamics that didn't directly affect her, and her sudden insight into my experiences felt both surprising and suspect. I appreciate you saying that, I said cautiously. The thing is, I've always assumed that you were okay with the way things are because you never complained or asked for more attention. You've always seemed so independent and self-sufficient, like you didn't need the same kind of validation that I've always craved. The observation was both accurate and completely wrong at the same time. I had learned to be independent and self-sufficient because I hadn't had another choice. Not because those qualities came naturally to me or because I didn't need external support and recognition. Everyone needs validation sometimes, I said quietly. I know that now. And Jessica, I want you to know that if there are things about our family or our relationship that bother you, I want to hear about them. I want us to be closer, especially now that I'm getting married and starting a new phase of my life. The irony of Amanda expressing a desire to improve our relationship at the exact moment when her fiancé was planning to leave her for me was almost overwhelming. I found myself wondering if this conversation was happening because she sensed on some level that major changes were coming to our family dynamic, even if she didn't understand the specific nature of those changes. "I'd like that too," I said, and meant it despite everything else that was happening. "Good. Because I have a favor to ask you, and I want you to feel comfortable saying no if you're not interested." "What kind of favor?" "Ryan and I are having dinner with his parents tomorrow night, and I was hoping you might want to join us. His mother specifically asked if you would be there, and I thought it might be nice for you to get to know his family better." The invitation felt like a test, though I wasn't sure what Amanda was hoping to learn from my response. Was she trying to gauge my interest in spending time with Ryan? Was she hoping to observe our interactions in a controlled setting? Or was this simply a genuine attempt to include me more fully in her life and relationships? "I wouldn't want to intrude on a family dinner," I said. "You wouldn't be intruding. Ryan's parents have met you several times at family gatherings, and they've always spoken very highly of you. His mother mentioned that she'd love to get to know you better outside of big group settings." I found myself curious about what Ryan's parents thought of me and what they might have said to prompt their interest in including me in a more intimate family dinner. I had always liked them during our brief interactions at holiday celebrations and other family events, but I hadn't realized that the feeling was mutual. "If you're sure I wouldn't be in the way," I heard myself saying, though part of me knew that accepting this invitation was probably not wise given everything else that was happening. "I'm positive. Actually, Jessica, having you there might help. With some of the tension I've been feeling with Ryan lately, you're good at keeping conversations flowing when things get awkward, and you have a way of making people feel comfortable." The compliment was unexpected and generous, especially coming from Amanda, who rarely acknowledged my social skills or contributions to family gatherings. But it also made me wonder if she was planning to use me as a buffer between herself and Ryan, unknowingly putting me in the middle of their relationship problems in ways that could only make the situation more complicated. "What time should I be there?" 7 o'clock at that Italian place downtown, Marcello's. You know the one? With the good wine list. I did know the restaurant, an upscale establishment that was popular for special occasions and business dinners. The choice of venue suggested that this dinner was meant to be somewhat formal, possibly an opportunity for Ryan's parents to get to know Amanda better before the wedding or to discuss wedding-related plans and logistics. "I'll be there," I promised, though I was already wondering what I had gotten myself into. Amanda smiled with what appeared to be genuine relief and happiness. "Thank you, Jessica. This really means a lot to me. And who knows, maybe Ryan's parents will have some single friends or colleagues they could introduce you to. It's time you found someone special." The suggestion that I needed help finding romantic prospects felt patronizing, but I recognized it as Amanda's way of trying to be helpful and inclusive. She had no way of knowing that someone had already confessed to finding me special, or that her attempt to expand my dating opportunities was coming at a time when my romantic situation had become infinitely more complicated than she could imagine. We spent the rest of our coffee date discussing lighter topics: Amanda's work projects, my latest clients at the accounting firm, plans for Mom's upcoming birthday celebration. The conversation felt more natural and comfortable than our interactions had been in months, and I found myself remembering why I had always loved my sister, despite our complicated relationship. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Amanda reached over and hugged me with more warmth than she had shown in years. "I'm really glad we talked today," she said. "I feel like we're finally starting to understand each other better." I hugged her back, fighting the urge to cry, because I knew that everything she thought she understood about our situation was about to change dramatically. In less than 24 hours, I would be sitting at a dinner table with her fiancé, who had confessed his love for me and was planning to call off their engagement. I would be pretending to be the supportive sister while knowing that I was inadvertently part of the reason her world was about to fall apart. That evening, I sat in my apartment trying to decide what to wear to dinner the next night, and wondering if I should call Ryan to warn him that Amanda suspected something was wrong in their relationship. But any communication between us felt dangerous now that Amanda was clearly paying attention to his behavior and looking for signs of whatever was causing his emotional distance. Instead, I found myself thinking about the conversation Amanda and I had shared that afternoon, particularly her acknowledgement that our family dynamics hadn't always been fair to me. The admission felt significant because it suggested that Amanda was capable of more self-awareness and consideration than I had given her credit for. It also made me wonder if she might be more resilient and adaptable than I had assumed when it came to handling the crisis that was approaching. But mostly, I found myself dreading the dinner at Marcello's and the complicated emotional dynamics that would inevitably arise from putting Ryan, Amanda, and me in the same room together, while Ryan's parents tried to navigate family relationships. They didn't understand we're about to implode. The dinner at Marcello's turned out to be everything I had feared and more. I arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, wearing a navy blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance between respectful and unremarkable. The restaurant was elegant, but not ostentatious, with warm lighting and intimate table arrangements that made private conversation both possible and inevitable. Ryan's parents, Margaret and Thomas Thompson, were already seated when I arrived, along with Amanda, who looked stunning in a burgundy dress that complemented her complexion perfectly. Ryan stood to greet me as the hostess led me to their table, and the brief moment when our eyes met sent an electric shock through me that I hoped wasn't visible to anyone else at the table. "Jessica, we're so delighted you could join us," Margaret said warmly as I took my seat. "Ryan has told us so many wonderful things about you over the past few months." The comment sent a chill down my spine because it confirmed what Ryan had said about paying attention to me and discussing me with others. Amanda's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, a reaction so subtle that I might have missed it if I hadn't been hyper-aware of every nuance in the group dynamic. "That's very kind of you to say," I replied, accepting the wine menu from the server, while trying to appear relaxed despite the tension I could feel building around the table. Thomas Thompson was a distinguished man in his early 60s who had built a successful career in commercial banking before retiring to pursue philanthropy and travel with his wife. Margaret was equally impressive, having spent 30 years as a high school principal before becoming involved with various educational charities. They were the kind of people who commanded respect through their accomplishments and character, rather than through wealth or social positioning. "We were just discussing the wedding timeline," Margaret said as the server took our drink orders. "Amanda was telling us about some of the vendor challenges you've been navigating." Amanda launched into an animated description of the various complications she had encountered while planning the wedding, from florists who had gone out of business to venues that had double-booked events. Her natural storytelling ability made even mundane logistical problems sound like fascinating adventures, and I found myself genuinely impressed by her grace under pressure and problem-solving skills. But throughout Amanda's recounting of wedding planning dramas, I noticed that Ryan was unusually quiet, contributing only minimal responses when directly asked questions, and spending most of his time moving food around his plate rather than eating. His parents seemed to notice his subdued demeanor as well, exchanging concerned glances when they thought no one was looking. "Ryan, you're awfully quiet tonight," Thomas observed during a lull in Amanda's wedding planning narrative. "Everything all right with work?" "Work's fine, Dad. Just tired, I guess." "He's been working such long hours lately," Amanda said, reaching over to squeeze Ryan's hand in what appeared to be a supportive gesture, but felt more like a claim of ownership. "I keep telling him he needs to delegate more responsibility to his team, but you know how perfectionists are." The description of Ryan as a perfectionist seemed at odds with the distracted, conflicted man I had observed over the past week. If anything, he appeared to be struggling with the kind of internal chaos that made perfectionism impossible to maintain. "Well, wedding planning can be stressful for everyone involved," Margaret said diplomatically. "It's natural for couples to feel some pressure during this time, especially when they're trying to balance work demands with all the decisions that need to be made. "Oh, Ryan's been wonderful about the wedding planning," Amanda assured her future mother-in-law. "He's very supportive, even when I get overwhelmed by all the details. Right, honey?" Ryan nodded and managed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amanda has incredible vision for how she wants everything to look. I trust her judgment completely." The response was technically appropriate but felt hollow, as if Ryan was reciting lines from a script rather than expressing genuine enthusiasm about their upcoming wedding. I found myself studying his face and body language, looking for signs of the emotional turmoil he had described during our conversation in the country club garden. "Jessica, what about you?" Margaret asked, turning her attention to me in a way that felt like a welcome relief from the undercurrents of tension between Ryan and Amanda. "Are you seeing anyone special these days?" The question caught me off guard, particularly given the circumstances of our dinner and the complicated feelings I was harboring for my sister's fiancé. "Not at the moment," I replied, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I've been focusing on my career lately." "Jessica's incredibly dedicated to her work," Amanda said, and I couldn't tell if the comment was meant as a compliment or a subtle criticism of my priorities. "She's one of the most successful accountants at her firm, always putting in extra hours, always taking on challenging projects." "Accounting is such an important field," Thomas said with genuine interest. "The financial foundation of every business depends on people who understand numbers and can navigate complex regulations. Have you ever considered starting your own practice?" The question touched on something I had been thinking about for years, but had never seriously pursued because it seemed too risky and ambitious for someone like me. "I've thought about it occasionally, but it would be a significant undertaking. Building a client base, handling all the administrative aspects of running a business, competing with established firms." "Those are legitimate concerns," Thomas acknowledged. "But from what Ryan has told us about your expertise and work ethic, it sounds like you have exactly the skills and temperament that would translate well to entrepreneurship." I glanced at Ryan, surprised that he had discussed my career aspirations with his parents in enough detail for them to form opinions about my potential for business ownership. The revelation suggested that I had been a topic of conversation in their household more frequently than I would have expected. "Ryan talks about Jessica's work?" Amanda asked, her tone carefully neutral but with an underlying edge that I was learning to recognize as a warning sign. "Oh, yes," Margaret replied, apparently oblivious to the subtle tension she was revealing. "He's always mentioning how impressed he is with Jessica's analytical abilities and her dedication to her clients. He thinks very highly of her professional capabilities." The silence that followed Margaret's comment stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable. Amanda's smile remained perfectly in place, but I could see something calculating behind her eyes as she processed this information about the frequency with which her fiancé discussed her sister. "That's very sweet of Ryan to notice," Amanda said finally. "He's always been good at recognizing people's strengths and potential." "It's an important quality in a leader," Thomas agreed. "Being able to identify talent and encourage others to pursue their goals." The conversation moved on to other topics, but I remained acutely aware of the shift in dynamics that had occurred around the table. Amanda had received confirmation that Ryan talked about me more than she had realized, and she was clearly filing that information away for future consideration. Ryan, meanwhile, seemed to be retreating further into himself, as if each mention of his observations about me was another weight added to whatever burden of guilt and confusion he was already carrying. As we waited for dessert to arrive, Margaret excused herself to use the restroom, and Thomas stepped outside to take a phone call from one of his charity board colleagues. The departure of Ryan's parents left the three of us alone at the table, for the first time that evening, creating an atmosphere that felt charged with unspoken tensions and unresolved questions. "This has been such a lovely evening," Amanda said, her voice bright, but with an undertone that suggested she was working harder than usual to maintain her cheerful demeanor. "Your parents are wonderful, Ryan. I feel so lucky to be joining your family." "They like you very much," Ryan replied, though his response sounded automatic rather than heartfelt. "And they obviously think very highly of Jessica as well," Amanda continued, her gaze moving between Ryan and me with the precision of someone conducting an experiment. "It sounds like you've shared quite a few observations about her work and her potential with them." I felt my heart rate accelerate as I realized that Amanda was using this moment of privacy to probe deeper into the topics that had emerged during dinner. She had clearly been bothered by learning that Ryan discussed me with his parents, and she was not going to let the matter drop without getting more information. "Jessica is family," Ryan said carefully. "It's natural to mention family members in conversation." "Of course," Amanda agreed. "But it sounds like your discussions have been quite detailed. Your parents seem to know quite a bit about Jessica's career goals and abilities." The accusation was subtle, but unmistakable. Amanda was pointing out that Ryan's knowledge of my professional life went beyond what would be expected from casual family interactions, and she wanted an explanation for why he had been paying such close attention to my aspirations and achievements. "I pay attention when people talk about things that matter to them," Ryan said, his voice taking on a slight defensive edge. "Jessica has mentioned her interest in potentially starting her own practice during family dinners, and I think it's a great idea. Is there something wrong with encouraging family members to pursue their dreams?" "Not at all," Amanda replied smoothly. "I just find it interesting that you remember so many details about conversations that happened at family gatherings. You don't usually retain that kind of specific information about other people's career discussions." The observation was accurate and damaging because it highlighted the selective nature of Ryan's attention and memory. Amanda was essentially accusing him of being more interested in my professional life than he was in other family members' concerns, which was uncomfortably close to the truth. "Maybe I should go," I said quietly, recognizing that I was inadvertently fueling a conflict between Ryan and Amanda by simply being present at the table. "I don't want to be the cause of any tension between you two." "Don't be ridiculous," Amanda said, her tone becoming sharper. "You're not causing any tension, Jessica. Are you, Ryan?" The question was clearly a trap, designed to force Ryan to either defend his interest in me or deny that any tension existed, both of which would reveal information that Amanda could use to better understand the situation. "There's no tension," Ryan said firmly. "Amanda, I think you're reading too much into normal family interactions." "Am I?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're more interested in Jessica's life and career than you are in planning our wedding or discussing our future together." The accusation hung in the air between them like a challenge, and I realized that we had moved beyond subtle probing into the territory of direct confrontation. Amanda was no longer merely suspicious about Ryan's behavior. She was actively calling him out on what she perceived as inappropriate interest in her sister. "That's not fair," Ryan said, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and glanced around the restaurant to make sure he wasn't drawing attention from other diners. "I care about our wedding and our future, but that doesn't mean I can't also care about what happens to your family members." "My family members? Or specifically my sister?" The question cut straight to the heart of what Amanda suspected, and I could see Ryan struggling to find a response that would diffuse the situation without revealing the truth of his feelings. The silence stretched long enough to become an answer, in itself, confirming Amanda's worst fears about the nature of Ryan's interest in me. That's when Margaret and Thomas returned to the table, their cheerful conversation about the phone call abruptly stopping as they sensed the tension that had developed in their absence. Margaret looked between the three of us with the experienced eye of someone who had spent decades managing classroom dynamics and interpersonal conflicts. "Is everything all right?" she asked gently. "Everything's fine," Amanda said, her social skills allowing her to immediately shift back into gracious hostess mode, despite the emotional turmoil I could see simmering beneath the surface. We were just discussing some family matters. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of polite conversation and forced normalcy, but the damage had been done. Amanda had received confirmation that her suspicions about Ryan's feelings were justified, and Ryan had been confronted with the impossibility of continuing to hide his emotional state from his fiancé. I felt like an unwilling participant in the dissolution of their relationship, watching two people I cared about hurt each other while being unable to prevent or fix what was happening. When we finally said our goodbyes in the restaurant parking lot, Amanda hugged me with what felt like desperation rather than affection. "Thank you for coming tonight," she whispered in my ear. "I hope you had a good time." The words carried a subtext that I couldn't quite decipher, but I sensed that Amanda was communicating something beyond simple gratitude for my attendance at dinner. Whether it was a warning, a plea, or an acknowledgement of the crisis she could feel approaching, I wasn't sure. 2 days later, Ryan called me during my lunch break at work. I almost didn't answer because I knew that any contact between us would only complicate an already impossible situation, but something in the persistent way my phone kept ringing made me think it might be important. "Jessica, I need to see you," he said without preamble when I picked up the call. "Can you meet me somewhere private? There's something I have to tell you before I lose my nerve." "Ryan, I don't think that's a good idea. Amanda is already suspicious about—" "Amanda and—" "I had a fight last night," he interrupted. "A big one. She accused me of being in love with you, and I couldn't deny it convincingly enough to satisfy her." My heart stopped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that she was imagining things, that I love her and want to marry her. All the things I was supposed to say. But Jessica, I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe me. She knows something is wrong, and she's not going to stop pushing until she gets the truth." "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to call off the engagement. Tonight. I can't keep lying to her, and I can't marry someone when I'm in love with someone else. It's not fair to any of us." The finality in his voice told me that he had made his decision, and nothing I said was going to change his mind. The wedding that Amanda had been planning for months, the future she had been building in her imagination, the relationship that had defined her identity for the past 2 years was about to end because of feelings Ryan had developed for me. "Where do you want to meet?" I heard myself asking, though I wasn't sure why I was agreeing to see him when everything logical told me to stay away. "The botanical garden near your office. There's a quiet area near the rose garden where we can talk without being seen." An hour later, I found myself walking through the Phoenix Desert Botanical Garden, following the winding paths toward the area where Ryan had asked me to meet him. The afternoon sun was intense despite the approaching autumn season, and I felt overdressed in my work clothes as I navigated the carefully maintained desert landscape. Ryan was waiting for me on a bench partially hidden by tall cacti and desert shrubs, looking like he hadn't slept much the night before. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke to the emotional toll of whatever confrontation he had experienced with Amanda. "Thank you for coming," he said as I approached the bench. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm here," I said simply, taking a seat beside him while maintaining enough distance to avoid any accidental physical contact that might further complicate our already fraught situation. "I told Amanda last night that I can't marry her," said without any lead-up or explanation. "She didn't take it well." I imagine she didn't. "Ryan, what exactly did you say to her?" "I told her that I realized I wasn't ready for marriage, that I needed more time to figure out what I wanted from life. I tried to make it sound like it was about me and my own issues rather than about my feelings for someone else." "Did she believe you?" "No. She kept pushing, asking if there was someone else, demanding to know if my reluctance to get married had anything to do with you. Eventually, I admitted that I had developed feelings for another person, but I didn't tell her who. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine how devastating that confession must have been for Amanda. She had spent 2 years building a relationship with Ryan, planning a future together, introducing him to everyone she knew as her fiancé and future husband. To have all of that crumble because he had fallen in love with someone else would have felt like the ultimate betrayal and rejection. How did she react? She threw her engagement ring at me and told me to get out of her apartment. She said she never wanted to see me again, that I had wasted 2 years of her life and humiliated her in front of everyone who knew about our engagement. The image of Amanda in that moment of raw pain and fury was almost unbearable to contemplate. Despite all the complicated dynamics in our relationship, she was still my sister, and the thought of her experiencing that level of heartbreak and public embarrassment because of my indirect involvement made me feel sick with guilt. "She's going to figure out that it's me," I said quietly. "If she hasn't already. Amanda isn't stupid, and she's been suspicious about your feelings for weeks." "I know. That's why I needed to see you before she confronts you about it. Jessica, I want you to know that whatever happens next, whatever your family says or thinks about this situation, none of it is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Didn't I? I kept your confession secret from Amanda for over a week. I went to dinner with you and your parents knowing how you felt about me and how conflicted you were about your engagement. I participated in deceiving my own sister about the most important relationship in her life. You participated in allowing me to figure out my own feelings and make my own decisions about my future," Ryan corrected. "Jessica, if I had married Amanda while being in love with you, that would have been a disaster for everyone involved. She deserves to be with someone who is completely devoted to her, not someone who is constantly wishing he was with someone else." The logic was sound, but it didn't ease the guilt I felt about the role I had played in the destruction of Amanda's happiness. She was going to hate me when she discovered the truth, and I couldn't blame her for that reaction. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I tell you that I meant every word I said to you in the country club garden. I'm in love with you, Jessica, and calling off my engagement doesn't change that. I know this is complicated because of Amanda, and I know you might not be ready to even consider the possibility of a relationship with me, but I needed you to know that my feelings are real and they're not going away." I looked at Ryan sitting beside me on the bench, this man who had upended both of our lives by falling in love with the wrong sister, and tried to process the enormity of what he was offering me. He was talking about the possibility of a real relationship, a chance for me to be with someone who claimed to see and value all the qualities that my family had always overlooked. "Ryan, even if I felt the same way about you, we could never be together without destroying my relationship with Amanda and my mother. They would never forgive me for this. What if they wouldn't forgive you for being loved by someone who chose you over Amanda? What if they wouldn't forgive you for being seen as more valuable and interesting than the family golden child? Jessica, what does that tell you about whether these are relationships worth preserving?" The question hit me like a physical blow because it forced me to confront something I had been avoiding acknowledging. If my family's love and acceptance was conditional on my remaining in the supporting role, on never outshining Amanda or competing with her for attention and affection, then perhaps those relationships weren't as valuable as I had always believed them to be. "I need time to think," I said finally. "Ryan, this is all happening so fast, and I can't make any decisions about my future while Amanda is dealing with the aftermath of your breakup. She's going to need support, and regardless of how complicated our relationship is, she's still my sister." "I understand. And Jessica, I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family. I'm asking you to choose between a version of yourself that stays small and quiet to make other people comfortable, and a version of yourself that acknowledges your own worth and reaches for what you actually want from life." Before I could respond to that challenge, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Amanda. I looked at the screen with a sense of dread, knowing that this was probably the confrontation I had been expecting since the dinner at Marcello's. "I have to take this," I told Ryan, accepting the call before I lost my nerve. "Jessica, we need to talk," Amanda said without any greeting or preamble. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying, but there was also a steely determination that I recognized as her way of handling crisis situations. "Amanda, I'm so sorry about what happened with Ryan. I heard that you two—" "Cut the act," she interrupted sharply. "I know it's you, Ryan's mystery woman, the person he's been in love with instead of me. It's you, isn't it, Jessica?" The directness of the accusation left me with no room to maneuver or deflect. Amanda had clearly spent the time since Ryan's confession putting together all the pieces of evidence she had been collecting, and she had reached the inevitable conclusion about my role in the destruction of her engagement. "Amanda, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. My own sister has been carrying on some kind of emotional affair with my fiancé, and both of you have been lying to me about it for God knows how long." "There was no affair," I said desperately, aware that Ryan was listening to every word of this conversation. "Amanda, I never acted on any feelings, and neither did Ryan. He was committed to you right up until he realized he couldn't go through with the wedding." "Feelings?" Amanda's voice rose to a pitch that was painful to hear through the phone. "So you admit that there were feelings involved? Jesus, Jessica, how long has this been going on?" "It's complicated, and I think we should talk about this in person rather than over the phone. Can I come over?" "No, you cannot come over. I don't want to see you right now. I don't want to see either of you right now. I need time to process the fact that my sister and my fiancé have been conspiring behind my back to destroy my life." "We weren't conspiring to destroy anything," I protested. "Amanda, neither of us wanted this to happen. We tried to avoid it." "You tried to avoid it? By meeting secretly in gardens and having private conversations about your feelings for each other. By lying to me for weeks while I planned a wedding to a man who was in love with someone else?" I couldn't argue with her characterization of events because it was essentially accurate, even if it didn't capture the full complexity of what had actually transpired between Ryan and me. We had kept secrets from her. We had deceived her about Ryan's true feelings, and we had allowed her to continue planning a wedding that was never going to happen. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Amanda, I'm so sorry that you're hurt, and I'm sorry about my role in what happened. But I need you to know that I never set out to interfere with your relationship or to hurt you in any way." "But you did hurt me. You hurt me in the worst possible way, Jessica. You let me make a fool of myself planning a wedding to a man who was never really mine because he was too busy pining after my sister." The pain in her voice was devastating to hear, and I found myself crying as I listened to her articulate the depth of her betrayal and humiliation. Amanda was right to be angry with me, right to feel betrayed and deceived, right to question whether I had ever really cared about her happiness and well-being. "I do care about you," I said through my tears. "Amanda, you're my sister, and I love. You and I never wanted any of this to happen. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth the moment Ryan confessed his feelings to you. If you loved me, you would have refused to keep his secrets and encouraged him to be honest with me about what was happening in his heart. If you loved me, Jessica, you would have protected me instead of protecting him." She was right, and I had no defense for the choices I had made over the past 2 weeks. I had prioritized Ryan's emotional comfort and my own confusion over Amanda's right to know the truth about her relationship, and that decision had ultimately caused her more pain than immediate honesty would have. "You're right," I admitted. "I should have told you immediately. I was wrong to keep his confession secret, and I'm sorry. Your apology doesn't give me back the last 2 weeks of my life, Jessica. It doesn't undo the humiliation of having my fiancé break up with me because he's in love with my own sister. It doesn't fix the fact that I have to call everyone we know and tell them the wedding is off because my relationship was built on a lie. The practical consequences of Ryan's decision were only now beginning to occur to me. Amanda would have to cancel vendors, notify guests, return gifts, and explain to everyone in her social circle why her engagement had ended so suddenly. The public nature of her humiliation would make the private pain even worse. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "Amanda, I know you don't want to see me right now, but if there's anything I can do to make this easier for you, please tell me. What you can do is stay away from me for a while. I need time to figure out how to process this betrayal, and I can't do that with you trying to make yourself feel better by apologizing and offering to help clean up the mess you helped create." The rejection stung, but I recognized that Amanda needed space to deal with her grief and anger without having to manage my guilt and remorse at the same time. She was entitled to handle this crisis in whatever way felt right to her, even if that meant shutting me out of her life temporarily or permanently. "I understand," I said quietly. "Amanda, I hope someday you'll be able to forgive me, but I understand if that's not possible right now." "I don't know if forgiveness is possible, Jessica. What you and Ryan did to me feels unforgivable right now." The line went dead, leaving me sitting on the bench in the botanical garden with tears streaming down my face, and Ryan watching me with an expression of sympathy and regret. "She hates me," I said unnecessarily. "She's hurt and angry, and she has every right to be. But Jessica, her anger doesn't change the fact that you deserve to be with someone who loves you completely, and it doesn't change the fact that I was never the right person for Amanda. Maybe not, but I was supposed to be the right sister for her. I was supposed to protect her and support her, not participate in breaking her heart. You were supposed to live your own life and pursue your own happiness," Ryan said firmly. "Jessica, you've spent so many years making yourself smaller to accommodate other people's needs that you've forgotten you have the right to want things for yourself?" I wiped my tears and tried to pull myself together enough to think clearly about what came next. Amanda hated me. My mother was going to be devastated when she learned what had happened, and I was sitting in a public garden with the man who had caused all of this chaos by falling in love with me instead of my sister. "I need to go home," I said, standing up from the bench. "Ryan, I need time to process all of this before I can even think about what it means for us." "I understand, but Jessica, before you disappear into your apartment to overthink this situation, I want you to remember something. You didn't do anything wrong by being lovable. You didn't do anything wrong by being the kind of person someone could fall in love with. And you wouldn't be doing anything wrong by allowing yourself to be loved by someone who sees your value." 3 months later, I was standing in front of a full-length mirror in a bridal suite at a resort in Sedona, adjusting the straps of an ivory silk wedding dress that had cost more than my car. The reflection looking back at me was almost unrecognizable from the woman who had sat crying on a bench in the botanical garden, wondering if her family would ever forgive her for falling in love with the wrong person. The woman in the mirror looked confident, radiant, and genuinely happy in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. My hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased diamond earrings that had been a wedding gift from my new in-laws, and my makeup had been professionally applied to enhance features that I was finally learning to see as beautiful rather than merely acceptable. "You look absolutely stunning," said David Chen, the man I was about to marry, as he appeared in the doorway of the bridal suite. "I know it's supposed to be bad luck for me to see you before the ceremony, but I couldn't resist getting a preview of how beautiful my wife is going to look." David was everything Ryan had never been, and everything I hadn't known I was looking for in a partner. He was successful without being arrogant, intelligent without being condescending, and completely devoted to me without being possessive or demanding. We had met 6 weeks after Ryan's confession in the botanical garden, introduced by a mutual colleague who thought we would enjoy each other's company. Our relationship had developed naturally and without drama, built on shared interests, compatible values, and genuine affection that grew deeper over time. David appreciated my analytical mind and my attention to detail, but he also encouraged me to pursue creative interests that I had abandoned years earlier. Under his supportive influence, I had started sketching again and had even begun taking art classes in the evenings. "I thought you were supposed to be getting ready with the groomsmen," I said, reaching up to straighten his bow tie. "I am, but I wanted to give you something before the ceremony starts." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. "This is from my father. He wanted you to have it as a welcome to the family gift." I opened the box to find a delicate gold bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a paintbrush. He remembered that I like to draw? He remembers everything you've told him about your interests and dreams. "Jessica, my parents are so excited to have you as a daughter-in-law. They've been bragging to their friends about how talented and accomplished you are." The contrast between David's family's enthusiasm about me and my own family's lukewarm response to our engagement was stark and sometimes painful to contemplate. David's parents, Margaret and Thomas Chen, had welcomed me with genuine warmth and interest from the moment we met. They asked thoughtful questions about my work, remembered details from previous conversations, and treated me like a valued addition to their family, rather than an obligation to be tolerated. "Are you ready for this?" David asked, taking my hands in his. "Ready to officially become Mrs. Chen and join our crazy family?" "I'm ready," I said, and meant it completely. The wedding ceremony was intimate and elegant, held on a terrace, overlooking the red rock formations that made Sedona one of the most beautiful places in Arizona. 40 guests had gathered to celebrate our marriage, including David's extended family, close friends from work, and a handful of relatives from my side who had chosen to support my happiness, despite the family drama that had preceded this day. My mother Linda was there, sitting in the front row with a strained smile that suggested she was still processing the rapid changes in my life over the past few months. Amanda was not there, having chosen to maintain the distance she had established after learning about my role in the end of her engagement to Ryan. The absence of my sister was a source of sadness that I carried with me as I walked down the aisle. But I had learned to accept that some relationships couldn't survive the truth about who we really were, beneath the roles we had been assigned. The ceremony itself was beautiful and meaningful, with vows that David and I had written ourselves and readings that reflected our values and hopes for our future together. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I felt a sense of completion and rightness that I had never experienced before, as if all the pieces of my life had finally arranged themselves into a pattern that made sense. The reception was held in the same location, with tables arranged to take advantage of the stunning desert views as the sun began to set behind the red rocks. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with people who genuinely cared about David and me and wanted to see us happy together. During the cocktail hour, I was mingling with guests and accepting congratulations when I noticed a commotion near the entrance to the reception area. Someone was having an animated conversation with the event coordinator, and I could hear raised voices even over the background music and general party noise. That's when I saw him. Ryan Thompson, dressed in a dark suit and looking like he had come directly from another formal event, was arguing with the security staff about gaining entry to my wedding reception. My heart stopped as I realized that he had somehow learned about my wedding and had decided to attend uninvited. "Excuse me," I said to the guests I had been talking with, making my way across the reception area toward where Ryan was still arguing with the event staff. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" I asked as I approached the group. "Jessica, I needed to see you. I heard about your wedding, and I couldn't let you go through with this without talking to you first." The security staff looked to me for guidance about how to handle the situation. Other guests were beginning to notice the disturbance, and I could see David making his way toward us from across the terrace with a concerned expression. "This is my wedding reception, Ryan. You can't just show up uninvited and cause a scene." "I'm not trying to cause a scene. I just need 5 minutes to talk to you privately. Jessica, You're making a mistake marrying someone you barely know when what we have is real and meaningful." The desperation in his voice was painful to hear, but I also felt a surge of anger at his presumption that he could disrupt my wedding day based on his own emotional needs. Ryan had made his choices about our relationship months earlier, and I had made mine in response. "What we have is nothing," I said firmly. "Ryan, you broke up with my sister because you thought you were in love with me, but you never actually tried to build a relationship with me. You never asked me out on a date, never tried to get to know me outside the context of family gatherings, never made any effort to explore whether your feelings were based on reality or fantasy. I was giving you time to process everything that happened with Amanda. I didn't want to pressure you while you were dealing with the family fallout. You were waiting for me to come to you, which I was never going to do. Ryan, even if I had been interested in exploring a relationship with you, I wouldn't have been able to handle the guilt and family drama that would have come with it. Amanda was right to be angry with both of us, and I wasn't willing to build my happiness on the foundation of her pain." David had reached us by then, and I could see him taking in the situation with the kind of calm assessment that made him so effective in business negotiations. He didn't look angry or jealous, just protective in a way that made me feel safe and supported. "Is there a problem here?" David asked, addressing Ryan directly, but keeping his tone neutral and non-confrontational. "No problem," I said before Ryan could respond. "This is Ryan, Amanda's former fiancé," I explained to David. "He was just leaving." Ryan's face went pale as he took in David's expensive suit and confident demeanor. But the real shock came when David's father, William, approached our group, having noticed the commotion from across the terrace. "David, is everything all right?" William Chen asked, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone nearby. Ryan's eyes widened as he recognized the face he'd seen countless times in business magazines and tech industry publications. William Chen wasn't just successful in business. He was the billionaire founder of Chen Technologies, one of the world's largest software companies. Ryan staggered backward, the full reality of what he'd lost hitting him like a physical blow. He'd thrown away his engagement with Amanda for a fantasy about me, only to discover that I'd found real love with someone whose family wealth made his commercial real estate success look insignificant. The irony was devastating. He'd chosen the wrong sister and lost everything in the process. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.